Hello, everyone. Welcome to Practical GCP. So today I'm going to cover a very important topic regarding data quality, and more specifically on how you could use Dataplex and Gemini in combination to manage data quality at scale. So this is a solution I've built that works end to end, and which I want to show you. So today's session is quite a big, pretty much loaded list of topics. So I'll go through these and to talk a little bit about why data quality is even more important today. The issue I've been seeing specifically in the last, I would say, probably 4 to 6 months on existing solutions and why these solutions don't work very well. I'll showcase a little bit of Dataplex and the Auto DQ feature. I do have a video already covered this kind of back a while ago. Consider this is kind of just a quick wrap of a high-level introduction, but I do want to dive into why this is good and why do you want to use it. And what a powerful solution, right? Using Dataplex, the Auto DQ feature, and Gemini in combination can actually help you to manage this your data quality at scale. So as usual, I'll do a code walkthrough and a live demo. It's going to be quite a lot of details in there, so it should be very interesting because this actually does work really well for me. However, there are some issues I want to highlight, and hopefully these can be addressed soon. And finally, I'll just basically do a summary on what I think are the most important things and also some future thoughts. Right. Okay. So why data quality is even more important today. So think, everyone's talking about GenAI, right? So sure, GenAI is important. You could build AI agents. You could train your own foundation models. You could use foundation models in various ways. Functional calling is something that's been taught a lot as part of the RAG applications. You could just call a normal function or you could call a database, right? So all these things require data. And I'm going to throw a few other things in here as well, which should be well aware. You have the traditional kind of API, which is what we've been doing before, let's say REST API, things like that. We also have two recent started getting a lot more traction because the way they work is one is 828. That's the agent to agent connectivity protocol. You can use one agent to speak to another based on this open protocol. And MCP think it as within an agent, and then you need something to talk to a tool, which is, let's say, to talk to a vector database in a common standard, but you don't really want to repeat these in your own standard, right? So these things are all very, very, very important. But without talking about a data quality topic, you literally cannot build any of these, especially not at scale, because things will very quickly fall apart when it gets complex, right? So if you think about today's landscape, you have maybe many solutions that relies on this third-party observability tool, which are typically the SaaS solutions. If you think about what this third-party tooling does, right, it usually offers two key things. One is the visualization, to look at your data contract, data quality, and monitoring these kind of things. But it also kind of have another way to kind of notify the users if something is broken. The way it usually works is, as a bare minimum, those tools will need to have access to your metadata. So imagine you have data you've built, data you've created on BigQuery. There's things like information schema. Those are all of the metadata you have, right? But the problem with this is, in order to do data quality observation of the data, let's say how the data quality of your columns in those tables that you have in BigQuery, whether you have duplicate records, whether you have if data is complete, there's various kind of categories I'll talk about in a minute. It typically requires access to your data, right? So these are basically the tables that containing your data, and a lot of these could have sensitive data as well. There's a problem with this approach, and typically I see the three. These are the three main ones that a lot of these businesses are complaining. The first one is obviously as soon as you open this one up, the metadata usually is much safer, right? Because it's not actually anything about it's not your customer record. But when you're talking about data, this could be your customer record. It could be their addresses. it just open these cans of worms on really increase your risk profile. The second thing is, especially for larger businesses, anyone has been through the procurement process, you would understand if you want to buy a SaaS product that to have access to metadata, it is a lot easier because there are categories like, oh, do you have access to PI? What is the risk of doing those sort of things? It could turn into a 1 month procurement into a 6 months or even beyond if you want to give this third-party tooling access to data, which is kind of very long-winded process as soon as you go there, right? The last, definitely not the least, is as soon as you get approval, as soon as you open this up, you would lose access to your data. You don't really know what these tools are doing. So sure, there's audit logs, but it is not actually in your control anymore, right? So this is the three main things. When I've been talking to businesses, they feel quite uncomfortable with when using third parties to, you just want to do data quality check. Why do you have to give access to all of your data in order to do that, right? So that's kind of the key things I have experienced. Now, what is the Dataplex Auto DQ thing, right? So this is a tool that within the Dataplex family called automatic data quality check. So, why do we want to use this, right? How does this solve the problem we just described? So, but before I dive into the tool itself, so we need to cover this 7 data quality dimensions. So this is not a Dataplex thing. This is a open, you can see it as an open framework with 7 categories and how you can actually measure your data quality, right? From freshness of data to volumes to whether it's complete, is it valid, is it consistent, is it accurate, is it unique? So right, those are the 7 categories. It's documented not only on the Dataplex documentation, but pretty much all of the data quality tooling share those attributes, right? They all use this. So they are the essence of how a solution can be created and used. So what's interesting with Dataplex is this Dataplex Auto DQ. It has something like this, right? So you use, obviously you can use the console. I'll show you in a bit. There's a console as well in the Google Cloud Console. You can see how this kind of gets interpreted into criteria, right? But you can see in here you have dimension, which in this case has completeness, and you have uniqueness here, and then here you have uniqueness again. So these are the categories that you can use. And what Dataplex does is it has you can obviously use the SDK, but there is also a way that you can use the YAML format to describe. It's like JSON, right? If you've not used it, it's exactly like JSON format. And you can use something like this to describe your data quality rules, right? So once you describe the rules, you can basically submit or create something called the scan, the data quality scan in the Auto DQ feature. Then it will basically, you can either manually trigger it based on certain events, or you can use a scheduler to trigger these. So these are the simpler ones that you can check. But you can also do something much more complex, such as if you look at some of these, you would see that you could also do complex. This is like a subquery. Specifically here, you can do even this is a construct that has postcode, which is within the address construct, and then in here you can say, hey, it must be greater than or equals to 0.9, right? So that's kind of the 90%. So this is the completeness, and then you have the valid data validation here as well. You can say male, female, other. You must have one of those categories. If it's not there, if it's not in those, it's false, right? So here you can also this is a more complex one where you can just basically say if anything returns, this fails, right? You even have this kind of quite a handy thing that you can use, this dollar data thing that basically just references the table it's currently scanning, right? So there's quite a lot of things that you can do in here in order to measure your data quality. But these are just basically rules, right? The thing is, if you think about this, now you have something like a YAML to describe your tool, but how do you put this whole thing together? Right now, I'm going to show you a high level in terms of what quite a powerful solution would look like if you combine Dataplex and Gemini. Right, this is what you can do in there, and then how does that differ to what the issues we had before, and how does it solve the problem? Then I'm gonna dive into the more low level design. So think this is a high level. So we still have the third party tool, right? But instead, in the bottom, you can see this is kind of a completely independent standalone system now. So this is quite interesting because now you can have Dataplex do two specific things. One is you can use it to do this auto DQ, use the YAML standard to scan your data. Keep in mind, this is all within your security boundaries. So you do not have to use any third-party tools to do this kind of stuff because it's automatic. And the best part of this is once you've done it, you can export your metadata generated from the scan, which is like when did it do it, what's broken, why did it break, what query you can run to actually even check, if you do any assertions, you can see, okay, why did it break, right? So that basically gets stored in a BigQuery table as your choice, right? And then you can basically visualize this. For example, in one way, you can visualize this through Looker. The users can check, okay, this is actually the example I'll give you in a bit in the demo. So you can see what kind of things you can do in Looker when you combine specifically, with Gemini. It can make a lot of these complex SQL with the explanations, like, long-winded explanations to give you a very good idea what is happening, right? So this is like really the power of the GenAI in this particular case. Or you can use this metadata to trigger things to notify users, right? You can integrate this with whatever system you currently have, the notification system. But the key point here is you don't have to rely on third-party system completely. However, having said that, you could still use third-party systems. But the difference in here is now usually third-party systems would have some ways for you to supply data as well, right? Especially for data quality check, some of these things you say, look, if you put this in the same format, and a lot of them do support those 7 dimensions, which is quite important, that this actually follows that. But the key thing is, oh, my apologies. But the key thing is that the data part is out of the picture now, right? So you don't give the third-party tools any access to your data. So you keep this private and you only share the metadata to the third party. So how does this solve our problem? So the first one, it is important, but you do have the choice, right? This is the key thing. You can use the third-party SaaS if you want to, if you already have it. Especially some of the third-party SaaS could have better visualization. There's nothing wrong with using it, but it is now your choice and it's optional. The second thing is because all of this complex stuff or the sensitive data scanning stuff happens internally. So if you want to use the third-party tool, now you only need to get approval to get access to metadata, which is a much simpler process. Or if you don't want to use the third-party tool, it's basically no procurement, right? It's already part of your stack. The key thing is you do not need to share data with third party anymore. So this is one of the key things I've been hearing again and again that especially the larger business are not comfortable with, right? Now let's have a look at the slightly low level. So the way that I've done this at scale is basically the inspiration I had is I did quite a bit of research. I did this with the Python libraries and I tried it with the CLIs. And then I saw a repository from that Google created probably quite a long time ago, maybe 8 months or so. It has quite a nice end-to-end solution that uses Terraform. But I think it's a little bit complex for maybe majority of the use cases. So what I've done is I took the key parts and made some changes. And this is kind of what I left with, right? So the concept is still the same. I've created a Terraform module, and what this module primarily does is 2 things. It converts the YAML, right? If you create a YAML, it converts the YAML into the language that Dataplex DQ can understand. But then it also has some features that can export the data into BigQuery, right? This is all in there. You have the invoker part, which is templated, which means you can use something like a variable in this particular case with an array of different elements. This is the key part that allows you to scale in your organization. Imagine you have, thousands of tables you need to monitor the data quality with. You just need to create the YAMLs, and then you need to use this kind of a loop. You can change it to simplify it to your use case, or add more automations in here. But you get the idea, right? So basically, you have something like this, an array. This defines every single data quality you want to measure using the YAML. And the YAMLs, what I've done is I've created convention with a rules folder, and then you have the name of the BigQuery dataset and then the table name, right? So this is kind of the things I've used for mapping. So this, I think, would help with the code generation and mapping. The naming convention you can see later on in the demo, which gets created, is following the same naming convention as well for all of the data quality checks that gets created in the scans, right? So this is kind of the low level. But now I will show you all of this. I'll walk through the code, and then I will give you a live demo on what this looks like in there. And there's some of the really cool features as well that you can actually see the results of all the runs right next to your BigQuery table. So let's have a look. For the demo, let's start with these repository that I've published. This repository is in our usual place in practical GCP examples, and it has a lot of useful stuff in here. So let me just quickly go through this first, so we can see the before we actually look at the what it actually does, right? So in terms of in order to test this solution, right, you need some sort of fake data to see what the data quality check actually does, especially in your organization. I strongly recommend you try it out first before just kind of implement the solution at scale. So first of all, you have this data gen folder. I need to update the README a little bit. You have two files in there. One is this one actually generate the data with some issues. So you can see in the code here, it doesn't generate the data perfectly. So it will deliberately leave gaps in things like duplications, postcode, invalid values, and all that stuff, right? This is all automated. It will create the data set if it doesn't exist. It will create a table if it doesn't exist, and then it will populate the 5,000 records in there. The no issues.py is basically exactly the same thing, but does it perfectly with no issues with data. So what I'm trying to do here is that I want to be able to use the fake data generation, and then I will put the YAML on top of these two different tables, and I want to see the auto DQ to give me something that is distinguish the ones that has issue and the one that hasn't. So I just want to see what it looks like, right? So that will give us some good examples to check, what if in the reality we don't have some of these number or values populated? What does it look like, right? So now we can look at the YAML rules. The YAML rules, I basically have this rule folder. I've got two files here. One is the customer with issues, and one is the customer perfect, right? So those two, they're exactly the same as the one I showed you in the PPTs. So here you can actually see there are different checks, 6 different kind of checks for the data. And some of the simple ones at the top, just basically checking the threshold of completeness, uniqueness, and then later on here, I'm checking things like to do a divide on the postcode to see what is the percentage of postcode is actually correct. Then you have is the gender valid? You have these 3 allowed values, and then you have something like this. So it's exactly the same. So that's the 2 in here, right? And then moving forward, you could try this with the CLI as well, right? This is my initial version before I saw the managed data quality rules code from Terraform, before the Google solution that I was inspired by. But you could also try this with the CLI, right? If this is what you want to do, you can try with the CLI as well. This is just much easier, but it's not the solution I would recommend you go with. You can try it with, but the Terraform one is the real deal. Okay, talking about the Terraform one, I'm just going to open this link. This is a interesting article that I found. That basically Google has proposed a very interesting end-to-end solution. So if you look carefully in the data quality rules and checks, so basically it's using this Terraform component with the rules.yaml files, right? So it's not one, there's multiple. And to basically give you a way that you can deploy all of these with the Dataplex data quality check and the BigQuery environments, right? So I look at the code in the Terraform. Is a little bit too complex, I think, for the majority of the use cases. So I actually created a much simpler version. I still use more than 50% of the code. So this one is worth a read. It's actually a very good read. But what I have done here is I've created a cut down version with much less things, but it still does pretty much everything you need. But it does give you more option to use whatever you prefer to deploy your own things, right? So if you have existing environment, it doesn't make any assumptions. It's just a module you chuck into your existing place, and it doesn't make any assumptions. So I think the other one does make a few assumptions, which I had to change a few things. But the key thing is in this module, right? You have all of these different files. I wouldn't go through every single one of them, but the key one is this dataplex.tf. So here you can see it basically construct the rules and a few other things like where does the data, the post scans, where does it export the table. You have other things that you can adjust by default. Right now, I'm just leaving it on demand because I don't want it to run on schedule. I prefer to trigger this instead. Some of the data scan IDs and naming conventions, all of the other things in here as well. And that so this is the key thing that you can actually alter this whichever way you want. This file, I pretty much use 70% of it. This is actually quite complex because what this does is it converts the YAML into a format, right? Basically, the Terraform module can understand. So behind the scenes, behind this whole Dataplex thing, I don't know where the original kind of came from. Yeah, basically, this is the Google Dataplex data scan. This is the Terraform module already created on Terraform. This is the registered and published one. But this is the usage of that, but it's still quite complex because we're trying to automate the whole thing, right? So that's this part. And let's go back. So yeah, the next thing is this main.tf. So this is the bit that for you, right? So when you want to use it, you would need to have some way to invoke the module. So I have the module here. And basically what this means is you template this whole thing. But my intent is that if you look at all of these parameters at the very, very end, what I'm trying to do is rather than you have to modify a lot of this stuff, all you have to do is to pass where your YAML file is. This right now is in local directory, but you can, change wherever you want to source this data from. And then you have which is data set you want to scan, which table you want to scan, and then basically repeat, right? So obviously you can simplify this, automate more, but you get the idea. So this is what allows you to do this as a scale, right? Because now we only have two. In the README, not this one, in here, right? So all you have to do is to run Terraform. I'll add a few docs in here, but you can just do Terraform init and Terraform plan. Will tell you what is to be added or changed on the YAMLs and the rules, and then you do Terraform apply. So that is going to apply for the whole thing. So there's a bunch of other things you want to read as well, because in order to use some of the GenAI features I put together, you do need to use the remote connection. So you need to create that, and then you can use the GenAI models. There's a few things here you can read about. These are references. But one more thing I want to mention in this repo, this is the last thing I want to mention, is this thing. So one of the most time-consuming things for me to build this solution is actually quite hard to find out exactly the options in the rules that it supports. So because there isn't really like a reference page and telling you these are the things that it support in the documentation, even some of the ones I referred here is all kind of partial. There isn't anything that is is complete. So what I found is this thing. So this is quite useful. It's basically the whole spec about this data quality rule. So you can see this is the base, the documentation that you have to go to, right? So when you have different components, for example, the post scan actions goes to BigQuery. You can click on that and it tells you what you can put in there. But for the rules, it's the same. If you click on rules, you can see all of the different rules that you can set in here, and then it explains all of this stuff. So it's just in the actual documentation where Dataplex is. This is actually hidden. But if you know where to look, and this one specifically, then all of the names and these would match to your YAML as well, right? So use this one if you want to have a comprehensive view of what you can put in the YAML. Yeah. So now let's have a look at the data we have, right? So this is where I want to show you what it actually looks like and when you run the Terraform. So you have so I use the data generator to create the data set and the two tables, as I've talked to you already. And the table, if you look at in the preview, I've basically generated a bunch of fake customer records, right? And also I want to test whether it works correctly with the struct, because there's some feedback that it doesn't work with struct. So I had to find a workaround for that. You have the ones that is perfect and you have the ones with issues. And this table particularly is the one that gives you all of the metadata they generate. This is like the gold, right? I'll show you why this is like the most useful thing. And once it's generated this thing, you can put you have the option to put all of the results into this particular table, and it's automatic. You don't have to do much about it once you set up. Now, remember I set up the YAML rules, and what those YAML rules going to translate into is this. We'll go back to that flashy diagram or chart later on. But first of all, if you look at the data quality under Dataplex, right? So you have Dataplex data quality. So in here, if you run that the repo that I've shared with you with Terraform apply, what it's going to do is going to create these two following the naming convention that we discussed, right? So there's an environment you can set as well. This is something I'm not entirely sure about. I guess, do you want to measure data quality on dev environment? Probably not. But you may want to measure these things on UAT, because I know a lot of the teams, especially if you're using DBT, that you might be developing your models on a UAT environment first once you merged it. And then on the UAT, you might want to check if your data quality is still kind of matching to your expectations. So the environment does play a part, I think, but this is really kind of up to you how you want to label it, and then the naming conventions, right? But this thing doesn't allow underscores, so to keep in mind. So I've used two dashes to separate the data set and the table name. So the convention here is done, right? So now what I want to show you is what happens when this is created. So basically, what you had in the YAML is translating into something like this, right? So the YAML contains all of the definitions, from ID, gender, emails, all of these rule names. Remember all of that things I set in there, and the rule type, the evaluation, the dimension. This is the most important thing, like which category you're talking about, and then the parameters, right? So this is very, very useful, because the YAML, as you can see, even for some of the complex ones, here you have 3 values, right? So it translates it into here, and then you have the this one is the complex one that translates into the select true from, to make sure everything is in the United Kingdom. And then this one is basically doing a dot notation strat lookup, and then you check the postcode is completeness is greater than 90%, right? So that's how it translates into this. You can run it here now. So keep in mind, I've set all of these in Terraform to not have a scheduler. You could have a scheduler. So there's a few things you can set in here. You can see you can also have sampling turned on. So this is where you need to just keep in mind, if you have lots of data in there, that you may want to sample your data. Although this a lot of the time is doing aggregation, so it's probably not going to cost you a lot anyways. But just keep in mind and evaluate. If you have very large tables, just make sure you test it first before you just rack it on everything, right? So you can see all of this stuff is all in here, and you do have the option. This is the one I want to really kind of raise as a big issue, is this option here, right? Is what's going to give you a very interesting feature that I will show you on when you run the data quality checks. Why is it quite handy for when you're developing things as well? So if you tick this box, and when you run this, it's going to link this with the catalog of your table. And that is useful because if you go back to here, for example, I didn't run this now, but you can see I've run quite a few. I can give it one more run. So if I go back to here on the one that doesn't have issues, the perfect one, I can go straight into data quality. You can see what is happening here. So every single run in here, you can actually see when it happened, right? And the score based on these 7 dimensions. This is very, very interesting and very, very useful. But I also want to show you what happens when it's failed. So if you look at this one, so because I've seen the failures, you see this one, specifically the last run status, it says 1 dimension, 1 rule failed, right? So this is very useful because you can click on it and it will tell you which one has failed. Now you can see the missing postcode check, status, aggregation, divide, and this is not working. If you open it up, it will also show you the parameters, and which category that it didn't work and blah, 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 right? So now you get the idea. So you can run the YAML with a Terraform. Let's say you do that for 50 tables, 100 tables, doesn't really matter. And then you can either set them as schedule trigger, or you can run it manually, or using other APIs to trigger it, right? Which I usually prefer, is if you have upstream jobs, you probably want to trigger this using let's say you have something at the very end of your DBT process, and then something is finished, and you probably want to build something to trigger those at the end of those things rather than do it on the schedule, right? Those are all your options. The key thing is, once you've done those and you trigger those, you would have this particular table. So this table would contain very interesting information. So not only will give you which project and then the regions and the scan ID, the tables, you can see it has all of that information on where it ran, but it will also give you something very interesting, which is this thing, right? It will tell you why it failed with a query that you can run. So this is interesting because, especially if you have something more complex, let's say if you look at this one, right? It will check if the email is in there. So this is where it gives us a perfect opportunity to tell us a bit more information rather than just eyeballing what is happening in there. So what I've done is, if you look at this particular query, so this is something I worked out that is very useful, at least for me. So what I've done is I look at this metadata generated by the data quality scans, right? So what is done here is it will give me the per day, how many based on a rule category that something has failed, right? But instead of just eyeballing this whole thing, what I've done is I use this AI.generate function. You probably noticed I'm still using Gemini 1.2/002, and because I'm on the London region, and there is a problem with the London region that it still doesn't support the 2.0 Flash. I'm not sure why, but it is the case. So it doesn't really change much, but I would prefer to use the better quality ones instead of this. But my point here is you can use the prompt to basically summarize. So I want a short description and understanding what is going on in this rules failed record query, right? So basically you can have something like this, and you can turn this into a Looker dashboard. You can easily do this with open-in Looker Studio. And this is what I've got, right? So you can see how useful this stuff is. So this shows me what is happening in the last, let's say, couple of days, right? On which table ID. You can add data set, you can add other things, but most importantly, I can rank it based on the most failed jobs, right? There's different categories. You see here, I've got the country check, the postcode check, and the no email checks, right? So the ones at the very top. So this is actually turned the text turned. So you can obviously add a lot more sophisticated things with more information on what your table looks like. Let's say you can feed the schema into there. There's many options, but even with a simple, just tell me what is happening in 20 words, right? It says check if any customer addresses in a table are not from the United Kingdom. See, this is way easier to read than just having something that is just SQL. So you can give this dashboard to the rest of your business, and if something happens, the human can read this thing without need to understand SQL. So some of the other examples: check if at least 90% of customer records have none, no postcode, returning pass or fail, right? So this is super useful just for a categorization of different things ranked by the most failures. So this really kind of on a daily basis, you open this up, it really tells you what is happening in your organization, right? And that combined with when you're actually is looking at the table, you can go to the data quality tab, you can see if something's broken, you can refresh this. I think this probably another one was running in the background. Is it finished? Yeah, it's finished. So yeah, so you can see there's different options that you can look at here. Okay, this is one is finished. You see the details in here. You can see everything is passed, right? But you probably don't care too much about the far past ones, but only the ones that have not passed. I think that's everything I wanted to show you. Yeah, in the repo, do check this out. The most important thing is this module has the everything kind of ready to turn the YAML into something that can be used. Oh, there's one more thing I do want to show you. This is actually quite important. I do have to share my screen, a different screen, so you can see how does this work. So now, what's interesting is there's one more tool that I want to show you, which is the retrieve YAML function. Remember all of the UI that you see right earlier. So I said you can use the YAML to run the Terraform thing to import it into the data, to create the data quality scan jobs, right? So you can create these ones. However, the reverse is also true. This is very, very interesting. So this retrieve YAML file, right? This is the script I've created. It's actually quite straightforward. You just can't need to find the right function to call, extract the right information you have. So what this does is, if I just run this, and then you get an idea immediately, I promise, right? So if I run this, so I've pointed this into one of these scans I've done. You see what's happening here? So there's two things in my code I'm printing out. One is the data quality specification. So this is the thing that this is not YAML, right? This is just within SDK, like it's thinking like a Python dictionaries. And then you have the YAML as well, right? But I printed out both. So the data quality specification here, you have the rules. You see what's going on here. You have the missing check, the description, all of the other stuff. Even for some of the complex ones, you have the rules with the safe divide. You see here the 90%, the three expectations for the three gender options, and then lastly you have the SQL assertion on checking dollar data. So it basically is a bi-directional thing. This is very, very powerful, right? So later on, I've converted this into YAML. You can see this is the same thing, right? Exactly the same. This is the SQL assertion. So what does this mean? This means you can, this is I think I showed this in the first video. I did it maybe quite a long time ago as well. It's basically, if you use the GUI, right, the console, then you can modify those rules, right? If you can modify those rules, but you can do it in, let's say, a non-production environment or something, right? And then you can see whether it works or not. You can try it out. And then you can use this tool to export it as YAML and then put it into version control for production deployment. So you don't have to remember how to do these things. I think I just got a brilliant idea. I think you can use probably a LLM to feed in the information of the entire documentation. Actually, you can create a tool to let it generate the YAML or update the YAML as well. So this could be something that's very, very powerful as a GenAI application to help you to maintain the data quality rules in there. But if you just look at this, this is basically identical to what we had in the previous rule, right? If you look at this one here, right, it's just exactly the same thing. Obviously, it loses some of the docs in there, but that's because this docs is not used. It's just for my information. But you do have the bi-directional way to control the YAML. So this is why the YAML is a very, very important way to deploy this solution at scale in your organization. So you can actually get a large group of teams to actually create these validations in a non-production environment, right? And then you can actually deploy those in the YAML to build this into the tool, maybe deploy those in the central team, make a pull request, then get a team to track this just to make sure the data quality rules are agreed before you make those changes. But yeah, you get the idea. So this is a very powerful way to scale Dataplex, both from, if you just have the YAML, you can deploy that to hundreds of tables. But if you don't have the YAMLs, you can use the console to generate the YAMLs and then put it into the tool, and then you can deploy with hundreds of tables again, right? Okay, that's the end of the demo. Okay, hope you found that demo useful, and I think at least I'm quite excited because it took me a while to figure out how to really kind of scale this thing. Because if you just do something in the UI or you do something with the even with the Python SDK, you can only track you can't track the states, so it's quite tricky. But with the Terraform way, you can really kind of make it really, really easy to manage with the variables. That can be deployed with the non-technical team as well. However, there are a number of issues that I want to talk about. I probably vaguely mentioned some of these already. It's primarily these three things. So the first one is the publish option. This is just things that mostly I just don't understand why there is no option to turn this on. because if you don't have option to turn this on, I mean, not via the UI, but via the Terraform or SDK or CLI, right? So if you don't turn this on, then in your BigQuery table, under the tab where it says data quality, you won't see anything because it's not linked via the data catalog thing behind the scenes, right? So I really hope this gets resolved soon, because if this can't be resolved, the whole solution is just going to miss that option, which is pretty annoying, right? So I don't think this is possible. So one thing that I noticed is the struct it has limited support. So not everything supports struct, right? So in terms of data quality checks. So I found a workaround, which is via something like this. You can use this kind of a subquery pattern to combine it with the dot notation like address.postcode. Then you can check these, and then you do percentage comparisons. In this case, is aggregations, right? So you can check if a column has a problem or not inside a struct. But I think it would be nice if this supports some of the high level functions. I think there's some of the completeness, the automated checks, not the ones that you write subqueries for, may not support struct. So I think that's the issue that need to be reviewed, and hopefully this has better support. But this is a workaround, so it does work, and I don't think it's a big issue at the moment. The last one, however, is quite a big problem. I noticed this for a while now, so I'm not entirely sure the reason. But Gemini 2.0 or beyond, right, or the Pro models as well, or the other models, nothing kind of a beyond 2.0 is available in the London region, so aka Europe West 2, right? I'm not sure why. Seems to be available in all the other European regions, just not London. It could be kind of the constraints that the Google API has. But at the moment, if you have your data located in the London region, you're out of luck. This is the problem. I'm 100% sure this will be supported soon, because it doesn't make any sense, right? It'll be good if any Googlers seeing this video, then maybe explaining why this is not available in Europe West 2. This is hence why I had to use the 1.5 Flash models in this particular demo. It doesn't make much of a difference for quality-wise, because I still was able to get what I needed. But I don't see why not. The 2.0 Flash, it should be supported in the London region, right? Okay. Let me do a quick recap. So I've showed a solution on how a combination of Dataplex, specifically the Auto Data DQ solution, combined with YAML, is a very powerful solution. So first of all, although this is a powerful solution and its data quality is important, because you cannot. So everyone's talking about GenAI applications, which is great and is very powerful. I had an idea how I can make this data quality stuff a GenAI powered thing as well. But you can see throughout the whole process I've done in there, the solution is primarily requires a very, very solid foundation to scale something, right? So it's the same for the data quality check with Dataplex. You do need a solid architecture, a solid foundation to build something like this, right? So it is very important to understand that, especially when you're building any data or GenAI based applications. Pay a lot of attention into making sure you have high quality data and high quality foundations, because without those things, very quickly your solution could fall apart, right? The other thing is it really give you a lot of insight if you combine the Dataplex Auto DQ, the YAML stuff, and then Gemini, right? So I've not spent a great deal of time to tune the prompt, but you get the idea. You have the framework, you have the SQL, you have the AI.generate function. The combination of those things really allow you to generate very powerful insight in a way that you don't have to have humans reading SQLs anymore, because especially for data quality, this stuff you just want to know what is happening, right? And then the metadata generated by Dataplex Auto DQ really gives you that in the BigQuery table, which you can utilize. This is very, very powerful. Whether that's for the Looker dashboard I've created, or if you want to do notifications, those are your source of truth, right? So those are your triggers. And it is important to always consider data security and usage control, because I see, some organizations, maybe you just say you get a tool and you plug it in and it works for you. But I think it is important to understand the risk as well. If you just give a third-party tool full access to all of your data, because in order to do data quality controls, you have to do that, right? So this is why I felt, based on the discussions I've had recently, many organizations are not comfortable with that. But with especially if you're on Google Cloud and you combine the solution with Dataplex, the YAML, the Terraform, which doesn't require much of a work for your engineering team to scale and deploy. And then you can send those metadata in a specific format. So a lot of these third-party tools, as I mentioned, do support the 7 category of dimensions or data quality dimensions. So, and that can be converted into a generic format for the other, tool to read from, right? But the last, definitely not the least, is it doesn't matter, how many cool GenAI agentic applications you build, the quality of your application is only going to be as good as the quality of your data. So please do pay a lot of attention on your data foundations, on your, how to deploy your applications, the DevOps processes, or how do you automate those processes, how do you control the versions, right? So the things I showed to you in there is all in version control, and I don't think you should remove that. Whatever you do, it should be kept in a way that you can revert into a previous version. This is why I've been spending quite a bit of time to make sure the solution is solid, in the sense that if something does go wrong, you have the previous version, right? That can only be generated through something like the version control. Okay, that's the end of the session today, and hopefully have covered a lot of things. So hopefully you found it useful. Let me know any feedback in below the video, or send me a DM on LinkedIn. Thank you very much. I'll see you next time.